Hello? Yeah.
Hello? Hello? Yes, hi. We can't hear anything out here.
There's no sound coming through Zoom. We're logged into Zoom, but it's
How about
completely
now? Can you hear me
silent.
now?
Okay, now we can hear.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
go
you.
ahead and provide your comment.
Okay.
Who are you speaking to? Did you call a name? We didn't hear that before.
Let's start with Agena Mohammed, please.
Okay, I'm Agena Muhammad. Hi. Um, spelling Ajeeenah. Last name Muhammad Muhammad. I actually just wanted to make an observation in regards to, I'm sure you've all talked about it, the 31st Street Beach incident with the youth. Just a few observations in regards to what I saw. I just wanted to implore the city to work with law enforcement for a better plan and response for the upcoming summer days. I live on the 10th floor of the Lake Meadows apartment building, and it appeared that the officers actually heard it, majority of the crowd, right into our residential parking lot. I ended up calling 911 for, let's say, 8 times during the course of the evening from 9:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Um, the officer response was lacking. They kind of, it appeared as if they were standing down from the crowd. So, they were out there doing a range of things, car surfing, loud music, waving guns, smoking, which I reported. At that point, an officer finally showed up at 2 a.m. Um, and then he just said on his loudspeaker, "Is anyone shot?" Very good then. And he actually drove off. So I complained again to 911. They said they would send someone back. They did. I went downstairs and it took about 30 minutes of confrontation before he actually took action to disperse the crowd. I was very disheartened by the response, and I just wanted to make that observation.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Ellen Corley.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, I guess it's just 2 minutes. You know, I meant to get down there tonight, and my main comment is that, I really would like to be considered for the chief of police position. I put my application in before with the last time and never even got interviewed. But the main thing is there needs to be a real transparency, human resources process here. And the main thing is to bring up issues that nobody's talking about because it's not covered in the media. One of which is the harm from vaccines and the mandates. This has been shut down and censored. I'm also working with Bobby Kennedy's and the Children's Health Defense Group, who are also being censored by the Democratic Party, which is very a powerful, corrupt machine in Chicago. And that's really what has to be dealt with. It's corruption, public corruption, politics. And we can't just keep the same thing that's going on. The whole world is looking at Chicago. And, there's a big opportunity with Brandon Johnson's election, and I worked with United Working Families to, tried to work. Actually, they wouldn't let me in because I'm not vaccinated. And this vaccinated is designed, it's a bioweapon designed to kill Black and brown people. And if it's not covered in the news, it's suppressed. It's the crime against humanity, and yet they've got us all divided. So people are afraid to speak up and speak out. And so, I think we've got hope here that you are putting me on. I couldn't get this onto NPR for the last 3 years. It's been scraped off of Facebook, LinkedIn. It's an issue. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lena Delau. And again, if you would like to speak in the public comment period, please raise your hand. Or if you're here in person, please signify to either myself or somebody on the commission. No, it's one more. Lena, you can give your comment now. Can we unmute her, please? We'll wait a couple more seconds. Lena Delau, your hand is raised on Zoom. If you will. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. We've reached the end of our public comment period. Thank you again to all of our speakers. We value your input. It's very important to us. Our next order of business will be the approval of a series of closed meetings related to appointments. Over the next several months, the commission and to commission staff, I was seeing stuff in the chat that said people couldn't hear. Can you please verify that there's people on Zoom can actually hear me before I continue? Over the next several months, the commission will begin engaging in a process of selection of candidates. Over the next several months, the commission will be engaging in a process of selection of candidates for publicly held positions as dictated by city ordinance. This will require a series of closed meetings related to those selections, including but may not be limited to the police superintendent, as well as members of the police board. Section 2C3 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act allows the commission to meet in closed session to consider the following subject: the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in this act, including a vacancy in a public office, when the public body is given the power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office when the public body is given the power to remove the occupant under law of ordinance or ordinance. Section 2A of the Act authorizes the commission to take a vote to hold a series of closed meetings over the course of not more than 3 months from today, and only for the purposes cited under Section 2C3. I move to hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act. Is there a second? Commissioner Driver has moved to hold a series of closed meetings that takes place over the maximum period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act. Commissioner Gomez has seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, we will now move to a vote. Those in favor of holding a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum time period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries, and the commission will hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum time period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act. Next, we will discuss our bylaws. We have an amendment to the proposed bylaws on feedback we have received from staff. This amendment will allow commissioners who cannot attend a regular meeting to attend remotely upon request and only if there is a quorum present in person. Are there any questions on this amendment? Seeing no further questions, I move to adopt the proposed amendment. All of those in favor of the adoption of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Our next order of business will be reports and updates. We'll begin by getting an update on police board nominees. We'll pass it to Commissioner Troncoso. No.
Okay. Thank you, President Driver. So the mayor appointed Asia Carr Favors and Andreas Stefakis to fill 2 vacancies on the police board, and their appointments were confirmed by the Public Safety Committee on Friday, April 14th, and the full City Council on Wednesday, April 19th. These appointees are the first 2 who were selected after having gone through the commission's new selection process. We want to congratulate Asia and Andreas and wish them the best in their new roles. Their terms run through August 10th of 2027. We also want the public to know that we will be opening applications for the police board as we anticipate filling at least 1 vacancy in the near future. The application will be available on the commission's website by next week. With the assistance of our staff, we will be engaging in extensive outreach efforts. We encourage interested and qualified applicants to apply.
Probably did. Thank you for the update. Do any commissioners have questions for Commissioner Troncoso or Loizon? Seeing no further questions on this matter, thank you, Commissioner Troncoso. Next, Commissioner Terry and I will give you a brief update on where we are in the superintendent search process. Commissioner Terry.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. The commission is responsible for conducting a nationwide search for the next superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. We have begun conducting the search with the assistance of the search firm Public Sector Search. This process began with input from the community and will conclude with the commission sending 3 candidates to the mayor. Ultimately, it will be the mayor who hires the new superintendent from the group of 3 that we sent over. As part of this process, the commission has committed to incorporating substantial community input into the selection criteria as we begin to vet and select the most qualified candidates from all over the country. We've hosted 3 community forums so far, and we have 3 more scheduled. These forums will be held at Roosevelt High School on May 4th at 6 p.m., Kennedy High School on May 10th at 6 p.m., Beverly Arts Center on May 22nd, and we are currently in the process of planning a Spanish-only forum before the commission's next regular meeting. The date and location will be provided via social media and our website when they become available. Actualmente estamos en el proceso de planificar un foro solo en español antes de la próxima reunión ordinaria de la comisión. La fecha y lugar se anunciarán a través de las redes sociales y nuestro sitio web cuando estén disponibles.
The intent of these meetings is to give the community a chance to contribute in person, but this is not the only time the community will have the opportunity to provide input. We have developed a survey that we are collecting from community members. Like everyone here tonight, in person and online, whether they can make it to the community meetings or not, the QR code for the survey is on the screen behind me. Please scan and complete this survey and make sure that your voice is heard. The purpose of these community forums has been to hear what qualities, competencies, and qualifications that the community wants in their next superintendent. We will use the information that we gather at these forums to inform the interview process, the questions that we ask the candidates, and the criteria that is used to classify applicants as we narrow the pool of applicants throughout the interview process. In addition to the community forums, we have and will continue to do direct outreach to experts in the field of public safety. So far, we've spoken to at least 15. Policing, police officers, and established groups with an interest in public safety, including business, faith, advocacy, and labor groups. We're also working on sworn police and civilian staff surveys and focus groups. So to recap the timeline, the application has been posted on the website, and we are looking to begin reviewing those applications after the May 7th deadline. So far, we have received 9 applications. The commission is unaware of the identities of any of the applicants as this process is being conducted by a search firm. Nominations are due July 14th to incoming Mayor Brandon Johnson. The mayor selects by August 13th or declines with written responses. If the mayor declines, we start the process over again. If the mayor accepts, the selection is subject to city council approval. I hope to see you all at the next forum. Do any commissioners have questions for me or Commissioner Terry? I also will take a point of personal privilege to sort of discuss some of the process and how it's played out thus far. And I want to be completely fair and transparent with the public. A lot of folks are organizing around their particular superintendent candidate. We are very appreciative of that. We appreciate your feedback. We appreciate your testimonies. We appreciate you sharing personal stories about how you interact with these candidates. All of that is taken into consideration. The questions that you all ask us will be asked directly of people who are applying to be the next superintendent. However, I also want to be very clear that this is not a popularity contest. We are looking for the most qualified candidates. So while I appreciate everybody that's organizing, I would encourage you to continue doing that, but also be aware that because a person has thousands of supporters or one supporter, that will not necessarily weigh in our decision-making process. As always, your voice will be at the front of this. We are listening to you. We appreciate you, but just want to be clear that we are not trying to conduct a popularity contest. This is also not an election. So just want to make sure that folks are aware of that. And I also want to clear up some misconceptions that have been put out there in the media. So we have committed from day one to making this the most transparent process our city has ever seen. We've also committed to engaging as many community members as possible. That's why we're doing these forums. That's why we have the surveys. That's why when most people ask us to come out to their communities, our answer is usually yes, if it's within reason. But just wanted to say that with transparency, sometimes comes media spin, and that's just the reality of it. So when the police board conducted this process that ultimately ended in the selection of Superintendent Brown, they released the number of applicants only after the deadline. There were a lot of stories that came out, a lot of tweets from different reporters and media blogs that said, we only have 6 applicants. There is no incentive for applying early. If a person wants to apply early, that is completely their prerogative. Us as commissioners will not get their names of who applied. We are firewalled off. We are blind to that until after May 7th. We will receive them all at once. Therefore, I say that to say it is completely not true that people are not applying because of the political climate, because of our new incoming mayor and a new administration, or because of anything else in our city. In fact, from the time I talked to one reporter yesterday to today, that number actually went up by 3. So we fully expect to be right around that number that the police board had the last go round. However, if that does not happen, we will be transparent with you about that. That is the one thing that we are all completely committed to. We will be transparent. If you ask that question every day, how many people have applied, we will answer you. We will never jeopardize a candidate's privacy. But I want to be clear that people are applying for this position. There is a lot of interest in this position, and we expect to be around the same number that we were in the past. And it's just my personal belief that we still do live in the greatest city in this country. And there's no lack of interest in this. And everyone who's talking about the climate in our city is just flat out wrong as far as people who apply. I don't know with that being said, if anybody else has something to say.
Just a point of clarification. Oh, thank God that works. I know that we recently released a statement about the selection of a search firm that will help in that process. Can you clarify what for the public and for the commissioners here a little bit about how the selection process happened, what the criteria was when we were evaluating the search firms that might have come forward, and whether or not this was something that was, to put it in simple terms, a selection that we made unilaterally, or whether we got different feedback and got different applications from different search firms.
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing that up, because I want to be clear too. It also has been written that we hired a search firm to gin up applications, which is completely false. With the very first meeting that I had with Superintendent Brown was way back in September, and you can't hear me? Can you all hear me better now? The very first meeting that I had with Superintendent Brown back in September, he didn't say he was leaving, but he alluded that he won't be here for years to come. He was pretty clear about that. Immediately after that, we started laying the foundation for a search. This is when most people who were running for mayor had not even entered the race. During those conversations, we decided right then and there that although we are bringing in staff, we have significant expertise and subject matter experts to work with. We wanted to make sure that we conducted a very thorough process. The decision to bring on a search firm was talked about way back in September. It is completely false that we're just now bringing in a search firm because there is a lack of interest in applications. In fact, it's completely erroneous. It would be silly on our part to hire a search firm 2 weeks before applications are due and think that they're going to be able to work a miracle. That is not true. We are bringing on a search firm to help with recruitment, but also help with background checks, people who have expertise in this field, people who have conducted searches around the country, and to make sure that if there's something that we're missing, that they can help us out with that. And I will let Commissioner Terry, who was more involved with the selection of the search firm, speak to them and their credentials.
As President Driver has already pointed out, we had this plan in motion very early on in setting the foundation for this process, which is why we've been able to move forward in the way that we have and make it appear to be seamless, which is also a kudos to our staff who have been supporting us. So as it relates to the firm that we've selected, they have an extensive history in the realm of doing national searches. They have done at over 50, I believe, I quote that number, searches at this level. So they are highly qualified, well-connected, well-involved. And as President Driver pointed out, this is just a measure to help support the work, because I do want us to be transparent as well. While we have a dynamic staff, we still are not fully staffed. And the 7 of us are working as full-time staff as well. So really, this is just an extra support for us, but please do not be confused. We are fully leading this process, and we will continue to, as we've already laid the foundation and all the way through the voting of the 3 nominees. I know that some of the other commissioners have questions, so I do want to give it to Commissioner Loizen, and then
can you guys hear me? Yeah. First, I just want to say that I would like to commend Commissioners Terry and Driver for all of their hard work on this. They have led the charge for the rest of the commission. And while Commissioner Terry indicated that we're all working full-time, they're working full-time with a ton of OT. So I do want to thank you for that. Also, I was wondering if the 2 of you would mind just elaborating a little bit on one of the points that you made, that you are working on police, sworn, and civilian staff surveys and focus groups. I have gotten a lot of questions from police personnel as to whether the commission would be hearing from them directly. I know that is our intention, but I was hoping that maybe you could elaborate on what that process might look like and when that will be set in motion.
So this is a discussion that we've had almost since we launched the search. There's a number of ways we have been trying to reach out to rank and file officers. So we have meetings set up with the sergeant's unit, a union with the FOP. We have been using relationships that we have with folks to reach out to rank and file officers. We've also been in contact with the department about possibly putting something out through their internal means. But that is that ongoing conversation. We've talked to a number of commanders who have shared that they're open to us actually coming and doing focus groups there. But I think the reality is that we are a new commission. We have some trust that we need to build with rank and file officers as well. And so we're still exploring the best ways to actually reach out to them. And I know I actually would like Adam, if you can elaborate a little bit more about some of the conversations that we've had or some of the plans that we have in motion that I may have missed.
Thank you. I'm Adam Gross. I'm the executive director of the commission and work with the staff to provide support to the commission. As President Driver said, we've reached out to all three of the police unions and have either met or planning meetings to identify ways that from their perspective, we can get the best information from police officers. In those conversations, the two ideas that have been most prominent are anonymous surveys that we could develop in coordination with the unions and that the unions would share with their members, and also focus groups where the participants in the focus groups could be identified and pulled together by the unions. We've also been working with CPD leadership, talking about similar ideas, which could include both an anonymous survey, which would be shared over the internet by the department, and we've had conversations about focus groups that they would help to organize. On top of that, there have been all sorts of less formal conversations, some initiated by members of the commission, some initiated by police officers themselves, and we'll continue to do all of those things, but we'll continue the work going forward with CPD leadership and with the union leadership.
And just one more plug. Joe walking in actually just reminded me of this, but the other half of our body is sworn in on Tuesday. And so I think a big part of that, there's a lot of district counselors who have relationships with officers and as well as commanders. And I think that'll be a big part of answering that piece of the puzzle as well. I'll pass it to Commissioner Nellis, who had a question.
Thank you. I kind of feel like you guys answered this question, but I'm going to ask it more specifically because it's actually something several people in North Lawndale came up to me just today and asked me. And so others may be having the same question, but what is the purpose of this search firm? Why did we hire one? And what authority do they have versus what authority we have?
So the answer to the last part of the question is they have whatever authority we give them, and which can always be retracted. I think the logic as we started to the working group as well as with staff, as we started to have the conversation about, and again, this is way before anybody knew anything about Superintendent Brown stepping down. The logic is that this is a process that was previously under the police board with significant staff resources from the mayor's office. Our body is specifically set up to be independent. With that means we don't have the resources of going to City of Chicago HR and going to the mayor's office who do the background checks for all of us to be on this commission and saying, can you conduct these background checks? If we were to do that, we're no longer an independent commission because we're relying on the mayor's office for resources. So in order to be a fully independent commission, we don't have that expertise. None of us are private investigators. None of us can look through a person's background as well as somebody who has experience in that area. But also none of us are officers. You know, we don't have law enforcement background. The firm that we brought in is former police chiefs. These are people who have conducted searches around the country. They know how to conduct very thorough background checks. The process is set up and designed by us. They take direction from us and they're assisting us in this process. So wherever there's a shortcoming where we don't have, Cody on staff who can do the research, or, Maggie and Charlie who can help us out with the legal part, they will pick up that slack. And they're also giving us a lot of best practices. They're telling us what we're wrong in past searches of major cities. They're giving us advice about people who have experience being under a consent decree and what went well in that city when they did a search and what didn't go well. So there's blind spots for us. So I look at it no different as with us trying to reach out to rank and file officers. That is a blind spot for our commission. We have to make up that difference. And that's why we have to be really intentional about reaching out to that particular community. Most of us up here are community folks that's our bread and butter. That's what we know how to do. So for me, it's more so just about filling in gaps where we are blind to. But to answer your question about authority, they only have whatever authority we give them. I don't know if you want another.
which isn't much.
Yeah, they have no decision-making authority. They're here to assist us. Commissioner Troncoso?
Is this working? Awesome. So part of my first question, which I guess is kind of a comment, you sort of started talking about, but I believe this is one of the only firms, if not the only firm in the country, that focuses exclusively on police chief searches, and that many of their staff are former police chiefs of major cities, just to give the public some color on who this firm is, and they would appear extremely qualified for this kind of search. And the other thing I would ask, which is if a community member wants to have us do another public forum in their area or with their, community that they are a part of, what is the process that they should go through to do that? Who should they email? What is that email? What is our preferred process? If we could lay that out.
Yeah, so that email address that I gave out earlier, what is it? Community Commission public comment at cityofchicago.org. You can send an email there. Or what is it? Superintendent search at cityofchicago.org as well. Either of those, we will get your inquiry. But I'll also be honest, and as I try to be, we have gotten a lot of requests. We are doing our best to meet with subject matter experts every single day. There's 5 or 6 meetings regarding this superintendent search every day. There's 3 to 5 media inquiries every day. We are having public forums, and we're doing our best to accommodate. But we are also only 7 people, and it's not possible to get to every area. So when we have these meetings, I'm very happy that I think the least attended was like 150 people. If you can, please try to come to the existing meetings that we have. We want to reach as many communities as possible. But it's also not possible within 120 days to come to every single community, but we will do our best to accommodate. If you make a special request, we also realize that there's different constituencies that sometimes, this was brought up at the West Side community meeting, that there's certain communities that don't like to travel or leave their specific area. We will try our best to accommodate you. So if you send those emails, even if we can't have a full meeting with staff and the QR code and everything, like us as commissioners will do our best to come out to your community and meet with you. Cool. Any other questions about this particularly? Seeing no further questions on this matter, Commissioners Brown and Nellis will give an update on CPD goals. Commissioner Brown.
Oh, now it's on. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I love that audience participation. Commissioner Nellis and I met with Interim Superintendent Eric Carter and other senior leadership for our first quarterly progress meeting for goal setting and performance evaluation. We want to begin our meeting tonight by saying that since we created these goals, former Superintendent David Brown resigned and left the department. Interim Superintendent Eric Carter was appointed and has since tendered his resignation for the middle of May, and we are waiting to hear who will become the next interim superintendent after Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson is inaugurated on May 15th. This is a great deal of transition at CPD, and it's coming at a difficult time when historically violence begins to increase in the city of Chicago. We are committed to continuing to hold the Chicago Police Department accountable to the goals we established for the superintendent. And we also want to acknowledge the difficulty of doing so when the person whose job we are supposed to be evaluating is going to be at least 3 to 4 different people in this calendar year. Our expectation is that all of the senior leadership who surround the superintendent in title and in duties will increase their commitment to these goals during this time of transition.
One of the purposes of meeting quarterly is to do assessments throughout the year rather than just wait until the end of the year. The reason for doing that is because if something's not being achieved or there's a need to change either the substance or timeline of the goal, then we can have those conversations throughout the year on a quarterly basis. So part of the process will be to amend goals as needed due to timing or other factors. And our commission will have to provide written approval for any goal previously set to be amended. Our intention is that this process will continue to be collaborative and cooperative as we work to strengthen the department and improve public safety together.
The vision statement we created for the goal setting and evaluation process was this. The commission envisions a community-based police department with positive morale, relationally connected to and deeply trusted by local communities, well-supported emotionally, physically, and mentally, courageous, measured, compassionate, trauma-informed, unbiased, and culturally competent, whose workforce reflects the diverse people of Chicago, effectively investigates and solves crimes with local communities, upholds the United States and Illinois constitutions, actively works with local communities to intervene and prevent crime, possesses the tools, management skills, and infrastructure needed to establish sound, data-driven strategies for department operations, routinely shares data about the department publicly, and leads with humility and transparency, always learning and listening to Chicago residents to continually improve police policies, practices, training, and outcomes. This vision requires the superintendent and the department's leadership team to drive the innovation, creativity, and meaningful organizational change necessary to realize this vision.
The goal and performance evaluation plan that we put together for the superintendent included, in addition to the vision, the strategies and goals needed to deliver this bold vision. The goals and performance evaluation plan contains 5 distinct strategies with measurable and deliverable goals identified under each strategy. Those 5 strategies are management and infrastructure strategy, partnership with community strategy, an officer wellness strategy, a human resource strategy, constitutional community policing strategy. Those strategies are actually written out in greater detail in the goals and performance evaluation plan document, but for the sake of time, we're not going to read them. We are only going to reference them by their topic. We identified 3 goals under the management and infrastructure, thank you, strategy, 6 goals under the partnership with community strategy, 1 goal under the officer wellness strategy, and 3 goals under the human resource strategy, and 3 goals under the constitutional community policing strategy. The plan, including the vision statement, strategies, and goals we set for the superintendent, are written and posted on our website for the public to view if anyone wants to read or learn more about them.
We have received 4 written responses for the goals that were due by April 1st. Commissioner Nellis and I have requested a follow-up meeting with the interim superintendent and senior leadership to go over these goals in more depth. We will submit to CPD our written responses once we have had a follow-up conversation with them. Our written responses will be made public through our website.
We want to be transparent tonight about one of the goals and a change made in the deadline date. On March 31st, 2023, we received a written update from Chicago Police Department regarding goal number 2 under the management and infrastructure strategy. This strategy states that the superintendent will possess the tools, management skills, and knowledge of infrastructure needed to establish sound data-driven strategies for department operations and routinely share this data publicly. Goal number 2 under this strategy requires the superintendent and/or his designees to complete strategic planning training to learn best practices in setting clear vision for the department, coupled with the strategies and goals needed to implement that vision within the department's annual budget. The goal of completing strategic planning training was to be completed by April 1st, 2023. The superintendent's office has been in regular communication with the commission staff and gave us the heads up prior to their written submission that the strategic planning training they selected to attend this year was not offered until May 12th, 2023, of course, after the April 1st deadline. Although we have not formally approved of this change in the goal delivery date yet in writing, we will accept that new deadline of May 12th as the date when the training will begin, particularly given the transition underway in the superintendent's office and mayor's office. The superintendent has told us in writing that up to 10 members of the superintendent's office will enroll in the University of Chicago Booth Executive Education Program titled the Advanced Strategy Program. It's a 7-week, 2 hours per week course that begins May 12th and ends June 23rd. We will be providing our written comment on this training, the substance of the training, and who should attend it in the coming month. It is our expectation that this training is tied to financial management training so that the department's strategies and annual goals are tied to the department's annual budget. This is needed to conduct a financial analysis of the strategies and goals set each year and their cost and effectiveness in reaching the desired outcomes under the goals and performance evaluation plan each year.
It's important to note why we believe this strategic planning training is important to improving the police department in Chicago. The superintendent of police is akin to the CEO of the police department. In this role, the superintendent is not patrolling the streets, solving cases as a detective would, or making arrests. Rather, the superintendent is leading and managing an office of 13,000 plus staff with an almost $2 billion annual budget. Understanding how to set vision, strategies, and goals for the organization, measure and evaluate the successful delivery of those goals, evaluate the costs and efficiencies of the department, recruit the best people to complete those goals, and equip and support staff to accomplish those goals is a skill set that is much different than the skill set needed to respond to 911 calls or solve a violent crime case. It is critical that the superintendent and upper leadership within CPD understand they are responsible for setting vision, strategies, and goals tied to an annual budget designed to improve important outcomes and deliverables that matter to Chicago every year. Until the department makes that shift in management, Chicago will not see the fruits of its labor and will continue to lack a cohesive way of measuring and evaluating department success.
The superintendent's strategic plan needs to measure important policing outcomes, such as whether the Chicago Police Department has increased community trust, lowered 911 response times, increased clearance rates, particularly of violent crimes, reduced wasted police time on pedestrian and traffic stops, resulting in no illegal activity, recruiting and retaining the best people for the job, and successfully implementing constitutional community policing practices. A police department that publicly and transparently sets target goals in these areas, identifies strategies to get there that are data-driven, establishes clear goals that are attainable each year within budget, is a police department that will ultimately improve every year. CPD in Chicago will learn together as we discover together whether strategies and goals set each year accomplish the desired outcomes they were designed to create.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Is this working? You all hear me? Thank you, Commissioners Brown and Ellis. Are there any questions from commissioners on this subject? No other mics work? Commissioner Gomez?
Testing, test. Yeah.
Come on, Kennedy King. I'm from over here. Y'all making me look bad.
Sorry about that to the audience. I know that we've fluctuated too with our sound, but I promise you we'll get better at it. I know you mentioned this, but I think it's important to restate the answer. And I've heard from community members that they're worried about the transition and the fact that Chicagoans are going to have multiple superintendents in the span of 1 year. Will the next superintendent that's selected, not as an interim, but as a permanent superintendent, also be accountable to fulfilling these expectations that we set out? And is there ever a possibility of us changing the goal set that we have started in the beginning of the year? How would that possible change look like?
I'll answer your first question, which is these goals were written for an office, not for an individual.
What was the second question, OG? Sorry.
You've talked a little bit about this and you've shown an example of it, but I think it's important for the community to sort of understand what the process of changing, altering, editing the goals might look like. I know you mentioned an example of what it could look like based on collaboration and based on communication.
Correct.
Futures could change, realities can change. What flexibility does the commission, the superintendent have when working through these goals?
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Gomez. So I do want to reinforce what Commissioner Brown shared, which is these are goals for an office, not a person, and that these goals are set by us. Of course, that was a collaborative, cooperative process. The goal that we had was that the superintendent would have a very large say in shaping and providing input into the goals that we set. As I think we reported out in February, that didn't happen. We ended on a good note and we celebrate that. The superintendent did accept the goals at the last day. But we, in a normal setting, or I guess in our desired setting, that would have been a very collaborative process. So in our first quarterly meeting, we acknowledged that about 3/4 of the goals that were written really without even Superintendent Brown's input. And that we wanted to hit the reset button, celebrate the fact that we all landed on accepting the same set of goals, and move forward in the collaborative, cooperative spirit that we had desired at the beginning. I do feel that that meeting was a substantial improvement to the meetings that we had in January. And so I will answer the question now by saying that once the new superintendent is formally chosen and in place, I think, and I would want my fellow Commissioner Brown, who's working very closely with me on this, to weigh in on this and affirm that we are in agreement. But I would think that we would have a conversation. And if there is a goal that the new superintendent would feel needs to be either the timeline changed or the substance shifted, tweaked a little, we believe that goals that are created and co-created or owned by the superintendent is more likely to be done. And it's important, quite frankly. I think the superintendent should be leading that process, and we are really providing feedback and changing those goals based upon our analysis. So long story short is I think there will be room for changing and amending, just as if a superintendent didn't change, we didn't have a new one. But it won't be just, oh, I'm new, and so I'm going to throw all these out and we'll start fresh. That won't happen for sure.
And I would add, it would be super exciting to sit down with a new superintendent and have them say, you need to include this goal that you didn't include, and give us a whole new goal to consider.
Thanks to both of you for the thorough report. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on your, I guess, rubric for judging some of these goals. As I was reading through your list, some of them I think are going to be very data specific, right? We'll be able to make a determination as to whether response times are lowered by data, clearance rates, that's data, reduced stops, that's data. What is going to be the benchmark for determining if CPD has increased community trust or recruited and retained the best people for the job? That seems like a little bit more amorphous. So I was wondering if you guys could elaborate on how that will be assessed.
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner Loizon. So I guess first thing I'll say is that we are actually currently working together, Commissioner Brown and I, with CCPSA staff and the superintendent's office in designing the rubric that where we will score them on these goals. And there's a number of different ways that organizations handle that. At the organization I lead in my day job, we have a 1 to 5. 5's great, 1's really bad, 3's in the middle. Well, actually 3 is like you did it, 4 is better, and 5's fantastic. That has not been decided. I'm just saying that for everybody's benefit as an example. We have not committed to that rubric. So we do want to have a quantifiable way of doing this. The second thing I'll say is some of the goals we already address in our first quarterly were not specific enough, measurable enough, or time limited in ways that we could, I think, do a proper evaluation. So we already started addressing this goal needs to have a date. This goal needs to have a little more, how are we going to define success? And yes, and I think to your point on the metrics you actually highlighted are actually not goals. And I want to be clear about this and why. Those should be, I think, where we're at the place where this is a normal practice within CPD, those are more likely going to be the goals and the metrics that we are going to be measuring. We were at a place where we did not have actually a really cooperative, collaborative process for 3/4 of the goals. That's first. Second, there was no strategic plan tendered. And so first step is, well, we've got to, what is strategic planning? How do you tie that to budgets? So that now in the future, our strategic plans are saying, hey, our goal is to reduce response times or response to 911 calls, increase clearance rates. So what we said is the goal in this document is that plan get created. And I think it's an October 1 deadline date because if I remember correctly, because it ties to the passing of the annual budget. So we expect the strategic plan that the superintendent, the interim in the meantime, and the newly permanent one, when that happens, will actually tender a strategic plan that will show how they accomplish those goals, specifically the ones you referenced.
Just a quick question. I know our goals are posted publicly. Is there a plan to publicize progress?
Yes, I mentioned earlier that we will be submitting to CPD our written reports from their written reports. So our reports on their reports, basically, and those will be posted on our public website.
One more question, and I think this is for the whole commission, not just the two of you. But I know that we are talking a lot about the superintendent and the police department. Do we have a similar quarterly meeting process for the other two agencies that we lead? Can someone just briefly say how that's going and what that process has been looking like? Again, the two other agencies would be the police board and COPA.
Microphone's closer to you. Go ahead. I'm talking a lot tonight.
Thanks for the question. And the answer is yes. We do meet with the police board and with COPA to assess their goals. We recently had a meeting with COPA to assess their first quarter goals. They were in compliance with the goals that were set. There was, without getting into specific details, because I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't have notes in front of me, but there was one specific goal that COPA was not able to meet due to no fault of their own. The circumstances did not permit it. So in addition to them reporting back to us on the goal setting, and Commissioner Brown and I being able to ask them questions and get feedback, we were also able to discuss adjusting the timeline on that specific goal, given that it wasn't realistic in the timeline provided. In addition, we do have meetings set with the police board that we set initially at the time of our goal setting. We have not reviewed their first quarter goals yet with them. However, we do have those meetings pre-planned so that will happen. And part of that is due to the fact that we were focused on getting those police board members through the process with the mayor and the city council. So now that that's done, we will be able to focus back on those first quarter goals. I do want to make it clear that we have not left the police board to their own devices, if you will. We have communication with them quite frequently regarding the selection process for their new members, as well as other issues that arise for the police board. But we have not had that specific goal review meeting to date.
Thank you, Commissioners Brown and Nellis, for that update. Seeing no further questions on this matter, we'll move on to our next order of business, which is miscellaneous business. Tuesday, exciting day. Tuesday is the culmination of a 50-year struggle. It's the inauguration of the district councils coming into being and taking their oath of office. Moving forward, yeah, right. Also, if there's any district councilors and can you please stand and be acknowledged? Moving forward and for our future monthly meetings, the district councils will now be a part of our operations and activities. This is an exciting moment. The commission will finally function at its full capacity as a grassroots-driven accountability body informed by district councils in every corner of the city. The district councils will make us stronger. They'll make us more informed. We will be more impactful and more accountable to our communities. I encourage people to learn about your district councils, attend district council meetings, talk to them about your concerns and ideas about public safety and policing. That is, as I mentioned before, the culmination of a 50-year struggle. It's an exciting time in our city. The idea behind the district councils, again, is that nobody should be more than a 5-10 minute drive or ride to somebody who can represent them in public safety. So definitely really excited about that. And hopefully some of you all can make it out to the district council inauguration at the Harold Washington Cultural Center at 10 a.m. On Tuesday. Want to also give a quick plug to our social media. If you're on Facebook, you can follow us at Chicago CCPSA, or you can search Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability and follow us there. If you're on Instagram, our social media handle is CCPSA_Chicago. That's the same thing on Twitter, and on YouTube, it's at Chicago CCPSA. Next, we'll announce our next meeting. The commission's next regularly scheduled meeting will be Thursday, May 25th at 6:30 p.m. Do we have a location yet? And that Malcolm X, thank you. That will be at Malcolm X College. Hope to see you all there. Is there any further comments or business before the commission? Oh, we got action.
Yes. Thank you. In response to a question from Commissioner Gomez during our March 30th public meeting, I stated that COPA still had cases open from its predecessor organizations, and I answered that incorrectly, and I would like to correct the record. When COPA launched in 2017, it inherited approximately 1,000 cases from its predecessor agency, the Independent Police Review Authority, or IPRA. It did not inherit any cases from IPRA's predecessor agency, the Office of Professional Standards. Since 2017, COPA has worked diligently to close the old IPRA cases while simultaneously addressing new complaints that fall within COPA's expanded jurisdiction. In the fall of 2021, during COPA's annual budget hearing before City Council, COPA announced that they closed the final IPRA cases. So, to set the record straight and to answer Commissioner Gomez's question correctly, COPA does not have any legacy cases open, which is amazing. COPA is only working on cases that were opened by COPA. With that said, and to pick up on what I shared with the public in March, COPA is still faced with large caseloads, which makes the timely resolution of all complaints a challenge. Since the summer of 2020, they have been engaged in a phased approach to effectively adjust their investigative operations to address that caseload with the goal of reducing the overall number of open cases and delivering more timely results for members of the public and Chicago Police Department. COPA is working with the commission, specifically Commissioner Loizon and me, to communicate their strategy, receive feedback from the public, and report on their progress. Commissioner Loizon and I want the public to understand that the root cause of COPA's caseload volume is complex and requires thoughtful discussion and a deep understanding of all the attendant issues. COPA has expressed its appreciation to the commission through Commissioner Loizon and me of the commission's willingness to work with COPA in this process and hold them accountable to the goals we have set and to the expectations of the public they serve. Commissioner Loizon and I, along with Chief Kirsten and her team, will have more to report in the coming months about the work being done by COPA and others to effectively and appropriately reduce COPA's caseload so that it can deliver more timely investigative findings to complainants and police department members.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Brown on this subject? Is there any further business before the commission? I know Oswaldo had something. Does the mic work down there?
Can people hear me? Okay. So this is more a comment, and I think this is something that I got reminded of from a comment that was made earlier, which I will not respond to directly, but I do want to point out something important about what you mentioned, President Driver. The district councils and the commission do have a relationship where we balance each other, right? The district councils have among the very powerful influence that they have over their community and among, you know, the great responsibility that they have, aside from the great responsibility that they have to actually engage the community, they're actually also kind of tasked with providing us with guidance. And we, I think, as interim commissioners are going to take that role very seriously because they have some requirements about how often they need to meet and about how they are to deliver those recommendations to us. So to the district councils that are here and to any that might be listening and to community members that might be curious as to, you know, how are those folks being observed? How are they being evaluated? There's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate and actually create a very powerful and healthy balance. Because this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of the whole commission. I do believe that we are creating a system that is very innovative for creating important solutions that will move the city of Chicago forward on public safety. That's going to require us to, in some way, oversee the work of the district councils, but also to be overseen by them, to be accountable to those folks who will be providing us with guidance and who will be holding us accountable when we fall short of that guidance as well. So just a quick comment for the folks that might be in the room and the folks that might be, you know, streaming us or watching us on YouTube or following us on our social media. Those are things that we're taking very seriously.
And I believe Commissioner Nellis had a comment. Thank you, Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a brief update on the other work that we are doing. Commissioner Brown and I, and I'm going completely off script. We, and which is why I also will be brief. We, I think 2 months ago, had shared that we were launching an inquiry into scorpion-like police practices within the Chicago Police Department. At the same time, Commissioner Troncoso and I are working on researching models of constitutional community policing that we think is the opposite of scorpion-like. So to build out community constitutional policing is to eliminate scorpion. To eliminate scorpion is to build out constitutional community policing. The update that I just want to share is that if you don't know, BPI, a local nonprofit, released a report in March of 2023 where they produced some data that was of concern, and I think will be the focus of our inquiry moving forward. They shared that since the 2015 lawsuit by the ACLU, which produced some very stark numbers in the number of pedestrians, predominantly Black and Latino, the number of Black and Latino pedestrians that were stopped and frisked, if you're familiar with that litigation. Since then, since 2015, BPI released a report that showed that traffic stops went up 700% from 2015 up until COVID. And the latest information that I learned of as of, I think, today or yesterday, meeting with some of the people from BPI, is that 2022 was up as well. So, and that they are still inquiring about present day practices regarding Chicago Police Department's practice and philosophy on traffic stops. I highlight that because one of the things that we are inquiring or interested in learning, and I'm putting it that way because we want to be open to whatever the data and the research and the best practices lead us. But this idea that mass stops, high volume stops, is what makes a city safer. Because if you, the logic, as I believe I understand it, is if you stop 1,000 people, you're going to find 20 people possibly with guns or drugs or some illegal behavior. And there is a belief, and sometimes even in North Lawndale, where I've held listening sessions, sometimes community members are like, well, maybe I can live with stop and frisk because it's going to get some guns and drugs off the streets. And I like that as well. But I think it's living in this false well, I don't know. I think we are open to learning and determining whether or not that's a false choice. That there is either stop 1,000 people to get 20 or those 20 people go free. And what we believe constitutional community policing, hopefully, or another model of something other than scorpion high volume stops, irrespective of constitutional rights, is that a constitutional community police force can actually be much more efficient, can be much more effective. That maybe you stop 20 people to get 20 guns and drugs off the street. Maybe perfection's unrealistic for sure, but certainly right now the rates that we are learning from either the 2015 or the 2023 reports from the ACLU and BPI would, I think anybody would say, extremely ineffective and efficient numbers when you're looking at whether it's 4%, 2%, or 10% of these stops resulting in any kind of illegal behavior being discovered. That's an incredible amount of wasted time, police resources that could be going towards responding to 911 calls, increasing clearance rates on violent crimes, and of course, equally important, stop harassing and harming the 960 people who had no illegal activity going on. So that would be the just rough summary of why we think this work is so important. And I thought it was worth highlighting now, particularly because we're in search for a superintendent. And I know for me, I will be wanting to hear what this superintendent believes about these kinds of practices and whether or not that superintendent will carry on the practice of let's stop everybody, particularly in Black and Latino communities, which is what the data shows, regardless of constitutional probable cause, reasonable suspicion, because at the end of the day, I'm going to get lucky with some percentage of these stops.
I just have a couple questions based on your comments. You've used the term scorpion-like police practices many times, which at least in my understanding is parlance referencing, the murder in Memphis, right? So I just want to clarify so we're all on the same page that when we use that term scorpion-like police practices, number one, to my understanding, there hasn't been any kind of study data finding that there is a particular scorpion-like practice that has been implemented in the Chicago Police Department, which is not to say that there isn't instances of misconduct or, excessive use of force. But I was just hoping that when you use that term scorpion-like police practices, that you can narrow that down so that everyone understands what we're talking about. Because I do think that that connotes the conduct in Memphis, which, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have something specific to point to in Chicago that is exactly like that within recent history. And I just want to make sure that when we explain what we're investigating, like we're all on the same page of what we're talking about.
So thank you for asking to clarify that. I will say, so correct, the reference is to the Scorpion unit in Memphis, the unit that stopped and then subsequently murdered Tyree Nichols. I do want to be clear about something though, that I think is important. The inquiry that we're leading, although it's not because of any degree of importance, quite frankly, it's just want to parcel out two very, very different issues. Unconstitutional policing and unconstitutional stops without reasonable suspicion or probable cause is the beginning part of what we all saw in the video with Tyree Nichols. Excessive force is a completely different issue. And so when I am saying scorpion-like policing practices in this particular inquiry, I am referring to high volume traffic stops without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. And I think we all know from the stop in Memphis, it was a completely bogus stop. It is important to recognize that was Memphis, that was not Chicago. I'm not saying that Chicago was responsible for that. What I am saying is that we have a 2015 ASEL lawsuit, 2023 BPI report that I think clearly demonstrates some form of scorpion-like police practices is actually happening here. And so I would disagree respectfully, Commissioner Loizon, that we have no reason to believe that those like practices are happening here. I'm not, again, I do want to be clear to differentiate excessive force, which I think, is a worthy investigation as well. But this particular one is challenging or investigating or researching and questioning the assumption, maybe I'll put it that way, questioning the assumption that high volume stops with disregard to the Constitution actually makes us safe. If the data actually shows that, then that will be our findings. So I just want to be clear about the difference between those two things. Yeah, okay.
I really appreciate this back and forth, and for the public, because of some of the open meeting act restrictions, we often don't get a chance to speak, amongst the seven of us and kind of have these conversations in depth, which is a good thing for transparency. But it does leave us feeling like there's a lot of questions that we have to have. So apologies for keeping you guys in this miscellaneous part of our agenda. I want to make a point about this conversation that we're having about data and about research and so on. I think for the public, right? People that don't get the fortune of being law enforcement experts, even people that don't get the fortune of, getting the mathematical training to be able to do some like really in-depth research into the social sciences on how to evaluate these things. There might be this perception that there is like data proven or best practice ways of answering some of these questions on whether or not high traffic stops actually work. And as someone who has been fortunate enough to be able to read these, research papers, I'll let you know that academics are not in agreement on any of these points. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be looking at those things, but rather that it is extremely complicated to be able to answer a question like, do high volume stops work? What's even more complicated, and I think this is where the community should really, really step up and be participants in our processes, is figuring out the impact that has on people's lives. Because if we can't even tell whether those are being effective at reducing crime, it's going to get even more complicated at figuring out how that affects the trust that we have between police officers and community members. Now, to Commissioner Loizon's point, I do want to point out that while we might not have scorpion-like practices that are like written out, I do think that there is and I applaud the efforts of Commissioner Nellis and Commissioner Brown in keeping an eye on this. There is a sort of evolution of stop and frisk into high volume stops and other methods that we have to watch out for, because we have seen that some of the methods of policing from the past do kind of evolve into these really, let's face it, really impactful methods of policing that really have detrimental effects on community and at the very least on community trust. I've been reading a lot about what the Chicago strategy should be, and I've been reading about, you know, what scholars and, you know, practitioners of law enforcement think about what, you know, the next superintendent and mayoral administration should do. I'm going to be very frank with you. Some of them propose ideas that have been largely debunked for years, right? Some of them point to experiments like the Kansas City experiment that was quite a failure, actually. And those kinds of things are things that as community members, we might not have the training to like parse out, but data is not something that gives you one answer. Data, just like politics, has a lot of different opinions. So I do want to point out that it is difficult to figure out whether or not there's a Scorpion-like unit in Chicago. It's difficult to figure out how these practices evolve. So when we think about how we evaluate data, we should know that it's a very complicated process that even academics will probably, you know, not agree on if we bring them up and have them have a panel discussion on this. So just for the community members, that's why your input is so valuable, because you can tell us stories that are true simply because they've happened to you.
So I just wanted to highlight one thing. The inquiry partly is also trying to understand, are these high volume traffic stops occurring in citywide units, area units, or district level? That is part of this conversation. And the Scorpion unit in Memphis was a citywide unit. There seems to be more and more national awareness around the harm that citywide units can do as compared to more localized community policing. And with that, I will end.
That was interesting. But I will say, as I've been sitting here listening, parts of all of the comments that I heard just now, I didn't feel like a commissioner or the president of this commission. I just felt like a Black man. And I was initially a little bit defensive into what Commissioner Louison was saying, and then I heard Cliff. And I think the tension that I was just grappling with, I think she has a point, because the way I'm receiving this, when you say Scorpion-like practices, I'm thinking about getting my ass beat. And it sounds like you're talking about high volume stops. So I do think language is important. This is not something I probably would have said before becoming a part of this commission and actually like growing as a leader and learning from police officers and learning from community members. But in like trying to remove myself from this and look at it from a very high level and look down, I think it's a real thing that maybe we shouldn't say Scorpion-like practices, because the way I would have never guessed that you were talking about high volume stops. I was immediately sitting here like, we got that in Chicago, people riding around beating up people. Like, that's where I went. And it had nothing to do with academic talk or like everything that y'all was saying. I was like sitting here just like, man, is that happening here? And like, how is this happening? Why are we not doing something? And then when you clarify, you're talking about high volume stops. I'm like, okay, yes, that does happen here. And I'm not saying that, you know, the other thing doesn't, right? Because I grew up down the street, right? I know what happens in Chicago. But I think her point was actually valid, that when we are talking about these things, that we use the language that we are describing. Because I can imagine being in an audience and just as a Black man hearing that and leaving like, damn, we have what happened in Memphis happening here. And it wouldn't have been, my mind wouldn't have gone to the stop. It would have gone to the beating. So I do think that was a very valid point, and that making sure that as leaders, we're using the correct language and describing it. And I'm not saying you weren't, but I think that's a fair point, that what Commissioner Nellis is describing is the difference between citywide units, beat level, as well as high volume traffic stops. And he was not necessarily, although he may have been, referring to people who were driving around brutally beating people. And sorry if that was really off topic. That's just in the moment how I was feeling about it. If there's no further business before the commission, I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope to see you on May 25th, and we hope you'll stay engaged and encourage people who you know to join us in this work, whether it be the district councils or whether it be this citywide commission. The only way that we are successful is if we have buy-in from the community, much like the only way our city will be successful is if we have the buy-in of the community. So we hope you will stay engaged with us. Please remember to attend one of our next community forums. Again, they're at Roosevelt High School on May 4th, Kennedy High School on May 10th, and the Beverly Arts Center on May 22nd. Check the CCPSA website for registration and other detailed information on these events. And with there being no further business before the commission, this meeting is adjourned. Yo, that's crazy. Like, you drink a lot. I don't know how you made it here. Nope.